Rowan of Rin, Chapter 2. We're listening for characters, setting, and problem. Rowan was panting when he reached the cool house. Trembling, he climbed the ladder and took two of the oldest cheeses from their shelf. The cool house was packed with cheeses, vats of smooth white milk curd, churns of butter. Plenty for everyone, but not for long if the new supplies did not replace the old. He left the cool house and hurried toward the orchard beyond which lay Shiva's hut. He could hear the sound of the crowd still assembled in the market square, and was glad he didn't have to pass them on his way. As he reached the outskirts of the village, he thought about what Val had said. Stumbling slightly in the ragged grass, he began moving through the hoopberry trees, dodging the twisted hanging branches. He thought about Septon, his father. Septon had come home from the market late one night, just after Aloud was born, to find his house burning. A log had rolled from the fire and set the ground floor on fire. Flames were licking the staircase, and the house was filled with smoke. Septon had shouted for help, then leaped up the burning stairs. He had pulled the unconscious Jiller and the new baby from their beds and carried them down to safety. Then, as the flames burned higher and hotter, he threw a blanket around his head and went back into the house, for Rowan, in the attic. No one could stop him, they said later, though the heat and smoke beat everyone else back. Even the giant Millers, Val and Alice. Even Strong John, Septon's friend. They saw Septon at the attic window with Rowan in his arms. They saw him fling the window open and heard him cry out. They rushed to catch what he threw to them, his son, screaming in terror, wrapped tightly in the rug from his bed. And then they heard a crash and saw the roof fall in and the flames leap and roar. Strong John, cradling Rowan in his huge arms, gave a shout of grief. Septon had saved his family, but he had gone from them forever. Rowan grew up knowing that his father had died to save him. He knew, too, that although they never said so openly, many people in the village of Rin felt that the exchange had not been a fair one. The villagers were farmers and traders now, but they were descended from great warriors, and in their time, when Rin was threatened, many of the older ones had fought to defend it. The War of the Plains was alive in their memories and recorded in dozens of volumes in the House of Books. The people of Rin were proud of their tradition of courage. At an early age, every village child learned to run, climb, jump, swim, and fight. Rowan had trained with the others, but he had never been good at anything. He had always been small for his age. He had always been shy. And since the night of the fire, he had been even quieter and more nervous than before. Val was right, he thought. He would never be the man his father was. And neither would he have the strength of his mother, who since his father's death had worked even harder, plowing the wheat fields with Star, planting and gathering the crop, and taking it to the mill. Rowan had been given the job of herding the bookshaw because it was easy. Tending the big, gentle beast needed no strong arm or great courage. Only once, years ago, had a keeper of the bookshaw come to grief, and the mine shaft into which she had fallen trying to save a wandering calf had been closed in long ago. A much smaller child than Rowan could have done the work, but he was allowed to remain with his beasts, and for this he was grateful. The bookshaw loved him, and knew his voice. They would look at him with their soft brown eyes and nuzzle his hand when he was sad, as if they knew his troubles. In return, he tried to make their lives comfortable, learning to cure their ills, treating their cuts and bruises as his mother treated his, combing burrs and prickles from their woolly coats. When the winter snows blew in the valley, he would bring the old and weak to shelter, for he knew that the freezing winds could kill them, and he could not bear to lose even one. In the spring, when the blossom of the orchard sweetened the air, he would turn and play with the calves and carry them handfuls of new peas he stole from the gardens when no one was looking. Rowan listened. He could hear the beasts now in the fields nearby, rumbling and snuffling to one another as the sun began to dip behind the mountain. He wished he was with them, instead of tripping over his own feet in the orchard with his arms full of smelly cheeses and his head full of shameful fears. He scrambled through the fence that marked the orchard boundary, and his steps slowed as he saw light flickering from Shiva's hut. Despite the coolness of the evening air, her door was open, and gigantic shadows wavered and crept on the strange pale grass that grew before it. He began to tremble again as he approached. Two of Bree and Hannah's children had once told him that Shiva could turn you into a fat slug if she chose. They pointed to the slugs that were picking from the cabbage leaves. These were all people once, they said. Look, that's our Uncle Arthur there. We know him by the spot on his forehead. He gave the witch a rotten tomato in a bag he traded for bellyache medicine. 1 rotten tomato in a bag of 20, and that's what she did to him. Goodbye, Uncle Arthur. Hello, Uncle Slug. Want to give him a kiss? They had pushed the withering creature up to Rowan's mouth and hooted after him as he ran away. Rowan knew that they had been teasing him. He knew it really, but sometimes in bed at night, or if a bookshaw strayed and he had to go near Shiva's hut to catch it, the children's story would come back to him, and he would remember the slow, fat slug with the spot on its forehead and shudder. Voices drifted out to meet him as he trod softly among the shadows on the grass. Strong John and Marley. And another voice, cracked and low. Shiva. The stream flows down from the mountain above the clouds, she was saying. Under the earth and rock it flows to Rin, and so you must climb to the mountain, to the very top, my fine friends, and none knows the secret way but Shiva! Her mocking laugh rang out. Rowan thought of putting the cheeses down on the doorstep and running home, but as he stepped forward, a twig snapped under the toe of his boot. At last! Strong John's head popped out the door. He put his arm behind Rowan's back and propelled him inside. The boy with the cheeses. Our gift to you, Shiva, he said heartily, in trade for your knowledge of the way. The old woman sitting by the fire sniffed the air and smacked her lips with a greedy sound. The cheeses, she gloated. Then she frowned and her eyes narrowed. Bring them here, she ordered. Closer, boy. Rowan hesitated. Marley, beside him, gave him a little push. His feet felt like stones. He forced them forward, 1 step at a time. What are you hiding? Snapped Shiva, half rising from her chair. I said closer, boy. Come here and put these famous cheeses in my lap, for how do I know that I am not being cheated, fobbed off with second-class goods? They are the best we have, Shiva, said Marley. Rowan chose them himself from the highest shelf in the cool house. You will like them. So you say. Shiva scowled as she hunched her shoulders and stared at Rowan. In the firelight, her eyes looked red. Her forehead was bound with a purple rag, and her hair hung like thin gray tails around her face. She smelled of ash and dust, old cloth and bitter herbs. Rowan reached her chair, placed the round yellow cheeses on her lap, and backed swiftly away, holding his breath, trying not to look at her. But Shiva had lost interest in him. She was prodding the cheeses with her bony fingers, snipping them one by one. Rowan hugged himself and shuddered, sheltering behind the tall figure of Marley from those terrible red eyes. What if he had chosen badly? What if these cheeses were no good at all? What if Shiva thought he was trying to trick her? The old woman looked up. They are good, she pronounced. As good as you said they would be, John of the Orchard. Naturally. Strong John bowed to her. Now, Shiva, said Marley firmly, will you tell us what we wish to know? Ah, brave Marley, Shiva giggled unpleasantly. She took some sticks from a basket beside her and threw them in the fire. It flared up as the sticks caught alight, and the shadows danced on her face as she turned back to them. Brave as you weave your cloth safe at home and dream of glory, but how brave will you be on the mountain? The mountain has ways of taming big, brave girls like Marley if they are so foolish as to try their strength against it. It has ways, so many ways, as you will discover. Rowan felt Marley stiffen and saw her cheek begin to burn red. We do not need your warnings, Shiva, she said in a level voice. And John, strong John, keeper of the trees, fine tall man, jeered the old woman, ignoring her. Now you come here to ask me favors. But what were you but a raggedy, bare-bottomed little boy like all the rest once upon a time, crying for your mamma when Shiva passed by? She bared her long brown teeth at him in a hideous grin. The mountain will not test your strength, John. It will destroy it, as it has destroyed the strength of men with twice your courage. And you will twist and blubber like a baby in the grip of the mountain, but the mountain will not let you go. There was a moment's silence. Rowan was rigid with horror. Strong John laughed. Then he planted his hands on his hips and addressed the old woman sternly. Quit your tales, Sheba, he said. They are wasted on me and Marley. The boy Rowan is the one who to fear them here. You should not think us so foolish as to follow his example. Look, you have scared him half to death, poor skinny little rabbit. And he picked you such excellent cheeses, too. You should beg his pardon. Sheba went on grinning, but her eyes shone scarlet. Laugh then, John of the Orchard, she sneered. If the boy is the only one afraid, he is the one of you with sense. It would do you no harm to be guided by him. She reached down into the basket beside her. And so, indeed, I must beg his pardon, she cackled. Then, fast as a striking snake, she threw a stick straight at Marley, who yelled and jumped aside in her fright, leaving Rowan to take the full blow of the flying wood. Rowan stumbled and nearly fell. The stick clutched in his hand and blood beginning to drip from a gash in his forehead. Strong John exclaimed in anger and stepped forward with clenched fists. A gift from Sheba, snarled the old woman, and I do beg your pardon, Rowan of the Bookshaw. Sheba, you go too far, thundered Strong John. Her lips curved. Do I so? She said. Well then, perhaps this meeting should be ended. Not until you have told us what we came to hear, cried Marley. She glanced at Rowan cowering in the shadows, and quickly the boy's forehead must be attended to. It's only a scratch, said Sheba placidly, but still, I grow weary. I am tired of your childishness. I will tell you what you need to know as far as I am able. Wait. She lay back in her chair and half closed her eyes. Her hands stroked the cheeses in her lap as though they were cats. The fire glowed. She began to drone and mumble to herself. For a long time they could make no sense of her words. Then at last she spoke. 7 hearts the journey make, 7 ways the heart will break. Bravest heart will carry on, when sleep is death and hope is gone. Look in the fiery jaws of fear, and see the answer white and clear. Then throw away all thoughts of home, for only then your quest is done. Sheba's eyelids fluttered and her eyes opened. For a moment, she stared blankly at John, Marley, and Rowan, as though wondering why they were there. Then her expression sharpened, and she waved her hand at them impatiently. She no longer looked like a witch, just a tired, crabby old woman. Go now, she said. I can tell you no more. But the way, Sheba, the way we must go, urged Marley. You have told us nothing. Have I not? Well, we will see. Perhaps you will feel differently by and by. Now, leave me in peace. Sheba's chin sank to her chest, and she was silent. They waited, but she did not raise her head again, and after a while she began to snore. She's asleep, whispered Rowan. Asleep or pretending, said Strong John in disgust. In any case, there is nothing more for us here. We must go back. The others have waited long enough for us. They left the hut and began to hurry toward the village. And we return empty-handed, exclaimed Marley, with Rowan bleeding. Rowan, I cannot forgive myself for stepping aside and leaving you to be struck. I was taken by surprise. The old devil intended Rowan to suffer, said Strong John grimly. She was punishing me for laughing at her and telling her to beg his pardon. The fault is mine. Rowan, trotting along beside them through the orchard, was feeling dizzy and faint, but whether this was because of the cut in his forehead or simply the terror he had felt in Sheba's cottage, he did not know. Her horrible warnings whirled around in his head, and her strange droning chant seemed to have been burned into his brain. He could not forget it. 7 hearts the journey make, 7 ways the hearts will break. He found himself repeating it under his breath, beating time against his leg with the stick he still held in his hand. Bravest heart will carry on, when sleep is death and hope is gone. Put it out of your mind, boy Rowan, said Strong John uneasily. Look ahead, the village lights. You will soon be home with your mother. He exchanged glances with Marley. And what will she say to me for bringing him home in this state? He added in an undertone.